Hello, my name is Muhammad Nassim Islam, and the reading I did was The Price of Glory, which talks about the Battle of Verdun, which is one of the prominent battles during the First World War between France and Germany. So, some context and background of Verdun. The city itself has been a prominent city in northeastern France since the 9th century and has existed during the Three Kingdoms era of Charlemagne's three sons, as well as the Holy Roman Empire. And it kind of always been kind of like a fortress city, or at least a fortified area. So one of the prominent areas or wars it was in was the Franco-Prussian War during around the 1870s, and it did unfortunately fall. The thing is, compared to the other fortified cities, it was actually the last city to fall, which kind of shows how resilient it is. Now, after the Franco-Prussian War, France was humiliated by Germany extremely. German soldiers marched around Paris and cathedrals and monuments, which really humiliated the French people, as well as France lost the territories of Alsace-Lorraine, and they also lost a lot of money as well. The thing is, though, is that the French vowed that they'll make a comeback to account for what they lost for. So, to make up for the industrial output they lost from Alsace-Lorraine, they made up for it with their colonies, and in just a few years, actually, they made up for their military strength as offensively and defensively as well. And most importantly, though, during this time, they incorporated or implemented a new defense system called Serre de Rivers system, which is basically where it will make a lot of cities like Paris and Verdun fortified areas by building a lot of fortresses around it. So right here is one of the forts, Fort Dalmont, and it was one of the fortresses that was actually built during around Verdun. And this is actually a before and after. So this was the beginning of 1916, before the Battle of Verdun happened, and this was the end of 1916, where, of course, the Battle of Verdun ended, and as you can see, it's been destroyed. And so the thing is that to kind of penetrate these fortresses, these pentagon-shaped fortresses, artillery bombardments were made to try and flush out and destroy any of the inside parts of the fortresses, so that infantry can move in and capture it. So this is the beginning of evisceration, where the Battle of Verdun officially started on February 21st, when German artillery began to bombard the city and many of the positions around it. In actually the first few days of the battle, over 1 million artillery shells were fired, which shows how ferocious the Germans were in wanting to take the city. And basically, they took out a lot of communication lines, weakened fortified structures and areas, as well as disorienting the French defenders in general, right? And so after the bombardment was over, German infantry came in and flushed out any sort of survivors, as well as to disrupt the defensive line of the outer ring around Verdun, which I'll get more into right now, actually. So the French defense of Verdun, it was comprised of two circles around the city itself, an inner circle and an outer circle. And these circles were pretty much comprised of multiple different fortresses and fortified positions. And it was split vertically by the River Meuse, making a extremely difficult city to penetrate offensively. And also Verdun was in a salient position as well, where it's pretty much a bulge-like position, so they were attacked by multiple fronts, making it very kind of difficult on paper for them to kind of defend. The thing is, though, is that geographically, the French, they were on kind of steep hills, while the Germans, they had to attack on flat plains. So what the French had to do was, whenever the Germans were coming in, they just popped out from the steep hills where the Germans saw them, and the French mowed them down with machine gun fire. So, yeah. And this is what I was talking about with the defensive circles. As you can see here, there's Fort Dalmont and Fort Vaux, as well as Fort Sauvel. which kind of surrounded Verdun itself. So you're completely surrounded. And also, this is a sailing position, a better look at it. So, of course, you're attacked by the north, the east, as well as the northeastern as well. So they had a lot of areas and a lot of fronts to cover and to resist, basically. The thing is, though, is that in the first month, actually the first days of the battle itself, the French unfortunately lost Fort Dalmont because they were so unprepared for it, really. So they lost one of their most valuable forts with little resistance. The thing is, though, is that the French did not let them pass. So German chief of staff Erich von Falkenhayn, who coordinated this attack, his goal was to bleed out the French manpower and resources-wise. So since he knew how important Verdun was for the French fortified areas, right, and that he knew that the French would do anything in their power to try to keep this position. The thing is, though, that fighting kept happening for months on months. So just attrition behavior and kind of properties were also inflicted on the German army as well. And the thing is that the French, how they had their defenses was they had fortresses and defensive positions surrounding and looking and angled and positioned at other positions as well. So if one position was being attacked by the Germans, a lot of fortresses and other defensive positions could turn and fire upon the Germans as well, which made offensive tactics extremely difficult to do. The French also had artillery positions as well, like Le Monton and Côte 304, which obliterated any sort of offensive direct or flanking maneuvers the Germans tried to do. So even if they try to go around a fort or a defensive area to try and take it by surprise, artillery would bombard these forces. And it was all kind of thanks to General Philippe Pétain, where the French defenders were able to effectively organize their defenses, organize counterattacks to attack worn down Germans, and also proclaim the battle cry, "Il ne passera pas," which translates to "they shall not pass" in English, which really made the French defenders have a massive advantage over the Germans. So the battle itself, it pretty much ended once Fort Dalmont was recaptured by the French, as well as a series of counterattacks that drove the German army further and further away from Verdun too. And the thing is, for Germany, the operation greatly reduced their offensive capabilities for the rest of the war, and the resources and manpower they were able to deploy, which really slowed down their momentum greatly. The thing is, for the French, the battle was celebrated amazingly by the upper command and the public as well, too, for the resilience of the French and Pétain. And that resulted in Pétain being promoted to commander-in-chief of the French army as well. The thing is that a lot of the French army and the German army as well were now psychologically scarred with PTSD, shell shock, anxiety, and other mental illnesses that plagued them throughout the war and afterwards once the war was over. So the conclusion is that the Battle of Verdun was the longest battle in the First World War, actually, lasting 299 days. And the fighting took place in Verdun resulted in mass casualties for both sides. So combined, there's estimates that there's about 600,000 to 1 million casualties, both sides combined. And of course, German offensive capabilities on the Western Front were extremely crippled too. So they couldn't conduct any sort of massive offensive campaigns in 1917. They did, of course, commit the 1918 spring offensive, but by then the Allied strength grew too much for Germany to handle alone. And of course, with France, even though they suffered a lot as well, the battle bolstered their morale and their prowess amongst the rest of the Allies, as well as it resulted in the rise of Philippe Pétain's prominence in the army as well. And that is my presentation on Battle of Verdun.